In April 2026, fighter jets from a Gulf nation secretly bombed Iranian oil infrastructure. Iran retaliated with over 400 missiles, and the US knew the entire time. For months, tensions in the Persian Gulf had been escalating. Iran was pressuring its neighbors. Proxy forces were active. The Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil choke point, was under threat. But what happened next wasn't led by Washington or Tel Aviv. It was led by a country most people wouldn't expect, the United Arab Emirates. And according to a Wall Street Journal investigation, this wasn't a defensive skirmish. It was a calculated, covert airstrike on Iranian territory. Here's what makes this different. The UAE didn't just support a coalition. It independently launched fighter jets into Iranian airspace, hit a strategic refinery, and walked away without claiming responsibility. Until now. According to the Wall Street Journal, in early April 2026, just after a US-Iran ceasefire was announced, UAE Mirage 2009 fighter jets took off and struck Lavan Island in the Persian Gulf. The target? A refinery operated by Iran's National Iranian Oil Refining and Distribution Company. The result? A massive fire. Significant damage. Months of lost refining capacity. Iran called it an enemy attack, but never named the attacker. The UAE never confirmed it. But US officials were aware, and reportedly gave quiet approval. This was a shadow operation in the middle of a ceasefire. Now, this might sound like just another Middle East military incident, but here's why it's a turning point. First, this marks the UAE's transition from a defensive player to an offensive actor. Second, it shows that Gulf states are no longer waiting for Western powers to secure their interests. Third, it reveals that covert warfare is now a standard tool in the Gulf, not the exception. And fourth, it raises a bigger question. Who else was involved? Because if the UAE was willing to do this, what about Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Israel? Let's talk about how this operation actually worked. The aircraft, Mirage 2009s, French-built and UAE-operated. Advanced radar, precision-guided munitions, and full night ops capability. These aren't experimental jets. UAE pilots have used them in Yemen and Libya. They have real combat experience. The target? Lavan Island sits about 130 kilometers off Iran's coast in the middle of the Persian Gulf. It's strategically important for Iran's southern oil exports. But here's the key. It sits outside Iran's strongest air defense zones. That means UAE pilots could hit a high-value target without penetrating the mainland's toughest defenses. The timing. The strike happened almost simultaneously with the US-Iran ceasefire announcement. While diplomats were talking peace, Mirage jets were dropping bombs. Now, some analysts believe the UAE may have also used Wing Lung 2 armed drones in the operation. These are Chinese-made. The UAE has used them extensively in Yemen. If true, this would show a hybrid approach. Jets for heavy strikes, drones for reconnaissance and damage assessment. It's a doctrine the UAE has been refining for years, and it worked. Iran's retaliation was not covert. It was immediate and large-scale. According to open-source data compiled during the broader conflict, Iran launched the following: 438 ballistic missiles, over 2,000 drones, 19 cruise missiles. Targets included Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and even Kuwait. Fujairah Port, one of the UAE's most critical energy export hubs, was hit. Civilian infrastructure was damaged. 13 people were killed. 224 were injured. For a country like the UAE, where the last major attack was a 2022 Houthi drone strike, this was a shock. But here's what's interesting. Most of Iran's missiles didn't reach their targets. The UAE's air defense systems, THAAD and Patriot batteries, intercepted a significant portion of the incoming fire. The UAE has invested billions in missile defense over the past 5 years. This was the first real test. And while some missiles got through, the shield largely held. This is the new equation of Gulf warfare. A few precision airstrikes can disable infrastructure for months. Hundreds of missiles can be launched in retaliation. But if your defense works, the damage stays limited. The cost gap favors the striker, not the retaliator. Now here's where it gets even more complex. According to the Wall Street Journal's sources, the US knew about the UAE's strike in advance. Washington didn't just tolerate it, it quietly welcomed it. Why? Because it fits into a larger American strategy. Let regional allies handle regional security. The Pentagon knew where those Mirage jets were flying. They didn't intervene. They didn't object. This was tacit approval. And it signals a shift. The US is no longer interested in being the sole enforcer in the Gulf. It wants its allies to take risks and responsibility. To understand why the UAE took this step, we need to rewind. A decade ago, the UAE was trying to improve relations with Iran. Diplomatic channels were open, trade was growing. The two countries were managing disputes over the Greater Tunb, Lesser Tunb, and Abu Musa Islands through negotiation. So what changed? Three major inflection points. 2022, Houthi drones, backed by Iran, struck Abu Dhabi. UAE leaders realized their infrastructure was vulnerable to proxy attacks. 2023-2024, the Abraham Accords deepened. UAE-Israel intelligence sharing expanded. Defense technology transfers began. 2026, the US-Iran war broke out. The UAE faced a choice: stay neutral or become a player. They chose to become a player. Why would a small, wealthy country with a 90% expat population risk this? Three reasons. 1. Iran's threats to UAE energy infrastructure were real. Tankers had been sabotaged, ports had been targeted. Defensive posture wasn't enough. 2. US pressure. The Trump administration's maximum pressure doctrine extended to allies. Washington wanted the Gulf states to do more than host bases. They wanted them to act. 3. Regional ambition. The UAE wants to be seen as a security actor, not just a trade hub. Yemen was the first test. Libya was the second. Lavan Island was the third, and this time the target was Iran itself. But this comes with enormous risk. The UAE's population is around 10 million. Most of them are foreign workers. Its economy depends on tourism, trade, and energy exports. All of these are within range of Iranian missiles. 13 deaths and 224 injuries is a high price by UAE standards, and Iran has shown it can do far worse. So why take the risk? Because the UAE believes the new Gulf power balance makes it worth it. This operation doesn't just affect the UAE and Iran, it changes the strategic calculus across the region. For Saudi Arabia, if the UAE can strike Iran and survive, maybe Riyadh can too. Saudi Arabia has been fighting Iran through proxies for years, but never directly. That line may be eroding. For Iran, the deterrent strategy, attack us and we'll destroy you, just took a hit. The UAE attacked. Iran retaliated. The UAE is still standing. For global energy markets, the Strait of Hormuz was already a flashpoint. Now, every tanker passing through the Gulf sails in a multi-actor threat environment. Insurance premiums have spiked. Routes have shifted. For diplomacy, covert operations erode trust. The UAE and Iran had been building diplomatic bridges. The Lavan strike may have destroyed them. And now we come back to the question that's hanging in the air. Who else was involved? The Wall Street Journal's report opened a door, but we don't know what's behind it. Was Saudi Arabia conducting its own covert operations? Riyadh maintained it was a US ally, but not an active combatant. But if the UAE was running shadow ops, why not Saudi Arabia? What about Bahrain? A small island state, home to the US Fifth Fleet, with deep sectarian tensions with Iran. Did they provide intelligence, logistical support? And Israel? Did the UAE benefit from Israeli intelligence on Iran's air defense network? Did they share targeting data? Flight corridors? We don't know yet, but the possibility is real. There's also a technology angle worth noting. The UAE's Mirage jets are French-made, but the precision-guided munitions, possibly enhanced with Israeli or US tech. The Winglong 2 drones? Chinese-made. So you have Chinese technology being used against Iran, a country China considers a strategic partner. This is the paradox of the modern arms trade. Weapons don't follow alliances, they follow buyers. And the UAE is a very good buyer. The UAE's decision to keep this operation covert wasn't just political caution, it was strategic logic. If the UAE had openly declared the strike, Iran would have had full justification for massive retaliation. But by staying silent, the UAE created ambiguity. Iran knew who did it, but couldn't prove it in international forums. That ambiguity may have saved lives. This tactic, called plausible deniability, has been used by Israel in Syria for decades, and by the US in CIA operations worldwide. Now the UAE has joined that club. But secrecy has a shelf life. The Wall Street Journal broke the story. And once a covert operation becomes public, the diplomatic cost can be higher than if it had been declared openly. Because now Iran doesn't just say, "We were attacked." They say, "We were attacked in secret, and the world didn't know." That's a powerful narrative. It positions Iran as the victim and the UAE as the deceiver, and it will complicate every future negotiation. So what comes next? 3 scenarios. 1. Other Gulf states follow the UAE's lead. Saudi Arabia, emboldened by the UAE's success, begins its own covert operations. The shadow war expands. 2. Iran recalibrates. Recognizing that overt retaliation has limits, Tehran shifts to asymmetric tactics, cyber attacks, proxy escalation, economic sabotage. 3. Diplomacy reemerges. The costs of this shadow war become unsustainable, and backdoor channels reopen. But trust will be far harder to rebuild. Which scenario plays out depends on what happens in the next 6 months. Here's the bottom line. The UAE's covert strike on Lavan Island wasn't just a tactical operation. It was a signal to Iran. We are no longer passive. A signal to the US. We will defend our own interests. A signal to the region. The old rules no longer apply. And a signal to the world. The Gulf is now a theater of multi-actor covert warfare. The Wall Street Journal opened a curtain. And what we're seeing behind it is a far more complex war than the official narrative suggested. The question is, how many more curtains are there? What do you think? Was this a justified act of self-defense? Or does covert warfare make peace impossible? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the geopolitics shaping global markets and security, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.